recently, and how I believe it applies very much to our current situation, our current climate of things, and I hope it can speak to you. But do you all want it to be known for standing for something? You like it to be known that you stand for something. You know, we're in a election season again. Seems like there's always another one rolling around, and this year, especially even locally, it just feels like it's very contested, very amped up, I guess you could say. And you got candidates all over. You know, you see them out there everywhere. All the signs, all the billboards, all the advertisements, all the social media posts, and whatever not else, and all these candidates are standing for something. They all have those, you know, those neat little one-liners on all their signs, you know, all the things that they stand for, you know, principle, integrity, vision, experience, progress, results, faith, family, justice, the people. And you know, this Torah portion this week is what? More, right? Say. People say a lot of things, but that doesn't mean they necessarily do them. Because, you know, there's a kind of standing that costs nothing. It's easy to stand with someone or stand for something when everyone else is standing too, when you're kind of in the crowd. But it's easy to say the right things when there's no pressure, when there's no consequences and no resistance. But the real test of where you stand isn't revealed in those easy moments. It's not revealed in the campaign. It's revealed when standing costs you something. It actually comes with a cost. And really the truth of the matter is that if you create some distance in the campaign, you withdraw it any way in the campaign from the things that you say you stand for, when things are easy, how's your faith going to stand when things really amp up? It's human nature. But the scripture calls us to something higher than that. If you want to turn to 1 Peter chapter 3, and starting in verse 9, this passage really spoke to me going through this here recently, and I turned to it for some direction, and it really tied into the Torah portions a couple weeks ago. 1 Peter chapter 3, he says, "Do not repay evil for evil or insult for insult, but give a blessing instead. It is for this reason you were called, so that you might inherit a blessing. For," and this is from Psalm 34, we were just singing this a little while ago, just hit me, "The one who loves life, wanting to see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek shalom and pursue it. For the eyes of Adonai are on the righteous, and his ears open to their prayer. But the face of Adonai is against those who do evil. Who is going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you're blessed. Do not be afraid or worry about their threats. Instead, sanctify Messiah as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope within you, yet with humility and reverence, keeping a clear conscience so that whatever you are accused of, those who abuse you for your good conduct in Messiah might be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if it is God's will, than for doing evil." You know, Peter here is writing to believers, those in the diaspora that are under pressure, you know, social pressure, the cultural pressures, even in persecution. And he's not telling them to blend in, he's telling them to stand out, to stand for something. And I want to talk about today this idea of standing for something, to probably the most divisive thing that's going on in the world as a whole, in this country for certain, maybe even in here, I don't know. And that is standing with Israel, standing with the Jewish people, standing with God's people. And you know, and I want to address this, that it doesn't matter if you're of Gentile background or Jewish background. It doesn't matter. The same choice has to be made of who you're going to stand with. Because you know, when we say we're standing with Israel, we tend to divide things in our mind. Some people will think of standing with Israel as the modern, what it is right at this exact moment in time, as whether it's a godly nation, whether it's following the word of the Lord, or others look at it more holistically in terms of what it has been, what it is today, all combined, whether at times it's the nation has followed God or hasn't followed God. When you say you're standing with Israel, whether you're talking of standing with not just Benjamin Netanyahu, but Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, go through it. What does it mean to stand with Israel? And I would hope at least everybody in here, if you're here, you all desire that that's what you want to be known. That yes, I stand for Israel. I stand with the Jewish people. I stand with God's people as a whole. But I want to talk about that, standing when it costs. Taking that idea of standing from something of distance to covenant loyalty. Taking it a step further than just what you say. You know, in 1 Peter 3, there in verse 9, he says that you don't return evil for evil, but on the contrary, you should be giving a blessing. Instead, when evil's dished out to you, give a blessing back. The opposite of evil's supposed to be kindness, blessing, right? At least that's what he's saying here. But often, the real opposition, the real opposite of that, sometimes we'll give evil directly back, but I find, at least more in my life, that the opposite when evil's given is just withdrawing, just stepping back. Because you know, when things get tense, people don't always fight. Many times they just step back. They go quiet, they disengage. They put a little distance between them and the problem. And it's not always because they hate, but most of the time it's just, I want peace. I don't want there to be any trouble. A few portions ago, starting in Zaria, it talked about that ailment known as Za'arat. And it's, if you don't know, that's what's translated typically in your English Bibles as leprosy, but it is not the leprosy that you see that is known today, that we know as leprosy. Za'arat was more of a spiritual condition. It was written, when you think about it, Za'arat was, all the laws in the Torah regarding it were written to whom? Israel, right? To the Jewish people. And it was something that took place and when God's presence was among them. And anytime you see it, it's always in relation to some way or the other with Israel. And Za'arat is known of having connection to what particular sin? Lashon hara, evil speech. And I got to thinking about this, and it was even hitting me when we were reading the portion out of Luke earlier, that Zaharat, so much of the Torah deals with one who comes down with this disease, this ailment, this. And could just one get it, or could maybe two get it? Maybe three could get it, or maybe four could get it, maybe 10 could get it. So what if it is indeed connected to Lashon Hara, to evil speech, is it possible that the whole nation could come down with it? It's said in rabbinical writings that the reason for the destruction of the temple and God's presence in the exile was baseless hatred. Lashon Hara, same concept of evil speech. Baseless hatred, and you have to wonder against whom? Against what? In Leviticus, in Zariah, we read about the one that had Zaharat. The one with Zaharat who has the plague mark should wear torn clothes. The hair of his head is to hang loose. He needs to cover his upper lip and cry, unclean, unclean. All the days during which the plague is on him, he'll be unclean. He is unclean. He's to dwell alone. Outside the camp will be his dwelling. And this was separation. But don't misunderstand it. This wasn't God teaching abandonment of this one. It was intended, the whole reason for Zaharat, it was intended to be temporary. The intention was it to be correctional. And it was to have a path back to restoration. That was God's heart in it. But the tragedy is we often take what God designed as something temporary and we apply it as if it's permanent and there's no hope. You know, there's a difference between God ordained separation that's to lead to restoration and what we do in separation for self-protection. And when it comes to the Jewish people, history shows the exact same pattern. When things are easy, people are friendly. Like it's real easy in here to talk about all these things and do all these things because we're among like-minded people. You walk out of here and it can be a different story. When things get hard, usually the first thing that people do is step back. It's not always loudly, it's not violently, it's just quiet and a little bit absent, or at least at first. And you know, if you place some distance between yourself and God's people in the easy times, it might just lead to complete absence when things get harder. Last week, Pastor Kelly was sharing this, and he was talking how, at least if I understood you correctly, on personal level, you would find maybe it was easier when things do get harder. Now's the harder time. And I hope that's true for all of us, that if the rubber ever really meets the road, that we would be able to make a wise choice and stand when we need to stand. But I'd say more often than not, though, it probably doesn't go that way. Because if you take any kind of distance now and step back now, you're kind of training your heart, kind of prepping yourself to disappear later on. I want to share something that happened with me here recently. Things have been very hard at my company. Been trying to get work. We've had a lack of it. There was a lot of pressure on me this particular year to go get the work that we needed. And I had a couple of very large projects that were with the state, a nearby state, not Tennessee. And in the process of these projects, I had to attend a pre-bid where the state officials will go over with you the scope of the project. You can ask any questions or anything like that, and then you can then bid on it. Well, we're at this pre-bid meeting. Iran, the war with Iran had just broke out that week, and in the question time, somebody asks that, well, these projects are very large and they're very spread out over time. They're going to take a while. And the material that we're using on is very petroleum-based. And seeing that what Israel's doing in the Middle East in controlling all the oil, what is the state prep to do in the meantime if prices continue to go up? And that room just immediately just split. I mean, the argument started back and forth. It started getting heated up. And I just kind of was observing for a moment. And then suddenly somebody yelled out to me, "Hey, you, I bet you'll make your fortune off of this one way or the other." And I thought, well, what, I didn't quite get it at first, but you see, for a long time now, one of the things that I have made a personal choice on is not just here, but while I'm out and about, I wear my kippah. And for me, it's been the tzitzit is a reminder of the commandments. For me, that has been not only a reminder of authority, but also one small visible way I can stand with God's people, stand with Israel. And that, in that moment, just that one thing, I suddenly got, with no background, this guy didn't know me from anybody else, but this guy all of a sudden is accusing me of all the problems in the world. And I think, men are funny, aren't they? That men as a whole, mankind more so, men as a whole, men desire power, they desire authority, they desire control, they desire leadership, they want all this stuff, and yet the Jews accused of all of this. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you join in if it's really true that the Jews controlling the stock markets and the oil industry and the media and the banks and the education system, the economy, and all that, if they really have that much control, who wouldn't want to join that club? But it's probably quite the opposite of that. And in that moment, when all that started, I knew, like, right in a split moment, I had a choice to make. Which direction was I going to go with this? Because I am not one that likes conflict, and I don't like arguments, and I don't like to be in something heated. And for me, the initial tendency is to want to back out to a place of isolation and get out of it. But I had a choice to make, and in that moment, it really made me think of this in Leviticus 18. You're not to act as they do in the land of Egypt, where you used to live, nor are you to act as they do in the land of Canaan, where I'm bringing you, nor are you to walk in their customs. You are to obey my ordinances and keep my statutes and walk in them. I am Adonai, your God. And here he's telling Israel, he's telling his people, you don't act like they do over in Egypt, and you don't act and follow the way that they're doing in Canaan. And is he telling that okay, well, this is for you guys, but the Egyptians, what they're doing, that's acceptable to me, but not for you? Or is he telling the Canaanites, what they're doing over in the land, that's acceptable for them, but not for you? Is that really what he's saying here? Or is he bringing judgment both on Egypt and the Canaanites for the way that they act? And we have a choice to make. Are we going to walk in the way of the nations and our culture and our surrounding, or are we going to walk with what God chose for his people? But pursuing peace, not just avoiding tension. And this is what I turn to. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek shalom and pursue it. How do you pursue peace? The word pursue really does matter here, because avoiding tension isn't the same as pursuing peace. Silence, you just go into a place of silence, it can look like peace, but sometimes silence is just fear, kind of with a calm face on. Silence in the face of wrong isn't always righteousness. And when Yeshua was accused and was on trial, he kept silent. But I think there's a big difference between something that's personal. In that case, let your own works praise you in the gates. But when you're watching others and a people as a whole being accused and put down and slandered, is silence really the best choice of action? Zaharat, back to that in Leviticus, the one who had Zaharat, the one who was unclean, the idea was that he was to be restored. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "This is the Torah of the one with Zaharat in the day of his cleansing. He should be brought to the Kohen, and the Kohen is to go outside the camp, and the Kohen is to examine him." The priest, the Kohen, was to go outside the camp. It wasn't, don't miss it, it wasn't that the priest waited at a distance and said, "You only come to me." The one with Zaharat wasn't even allowed in the camp. The priest had to go outside the camp, into the place of their separation, into the place of their discomfort, into the place everybody else avoided. And if we're going to reflect God's heart, we just can't be passive and waiting on something to happen. Sometimes we have to go out there into the place of discomfort. Looking back on the events that happened that day, I had different people I shared it with had different opinions and different things. Had how to get out of that quick was, well, you could, why didn't it, you could say that, well, more of my DNA isn't Jewish than the DNA that is Jewish. Would that get you out of it? Do they really care on something like that? Do they care that, mainstream Judaism doesn't accept us as part of it because we believe in Yeshua as the Messiah? Could have said something like that. I don't know that that would have mattered in the moment. Or, well, this is actually a hat to cover up a blemish on my head and means nothing else. And there was all kinds of ways I could have quickly backed out of the situation and ignored it. And the problem grew and grew, and it is still going on. In fact, right now it's sitting at the governor's desk. It's escalated that far. And I thought it was resolved about a week ago, but it's not. And the threat has came down to the point where it's all going is all the work. I ended up being successful in bidding all these projects, but there's a risk that I won't get them based on all of this. And the Jewish people as a whole, Israel, you think about it, Israel's treated as if they all have Zaharat, right? They all have this. They're treated with contempt, with scorn, rejection, isolation, hatred, as if there's no chance for redemption or restoration. It's as if they're a thing of the past. There's no hope for you. The last 2,000 years have certainly shown that. And the one who had Zaharat had it for a reason, right? It was connected to something God was trying to instill in that individual or correct in that individual. He made this ailment come upon him for a reason. So don't make a mistake about it. If all of Israel truly has this in a way, due to the disobedience to the Torah and ultimately to the rejection of Messiah, they've been, quote, cast out of the land, cast out of the camp. But it wasn't a place of permanent abandonment. The whole purpose in the exile was, it was supposed to be a path back to restoration. It was to be corrective. And so we have to decide whether you want to be one who stays a long distance away or be like the priest who goes outside the camp. It really brought light to that verse. So let us go to him outside the camp, bearing his disgrace. Messiah, Israel, Mashiach and Israel cannot be separated from one another. They are so intertwined one with the other. When reading through Isaiah, and you look at the servant, it's like there'll be a time you'll look at it and you'll go, this is clearly talking about Mashiach, and then this is clearly talking about Israel, and then you can look at other passages and go, it could be talking about either or both. Out of Egypt I called my son. Israel was the firstborn brought out of Egypt. Yeshua, firstborn, also coming up out of Egypt. You can't separate the two. And when you look at that idea that whatever happens to Messiah happens to Israel as a whole, Yeshua was treated as though he was unclean, unfit, cast out of the camp. The rest of the nation followed. So if you say you stand with Israel, if you say you stand with the Jewish people, I want to talk a moment about what it doesn't mean. Standing isn't a quiet opinion. Just having an opinion about something doesn't mean you're standing. It's not a private belief. You could say, "Oh, I believe that that we're to bless and not curse." Just because you say that's what you believe, that's not necessarily standing either. Standing isn't a knowledge of facts. And I've shared that before, that's a problem that I see in a lot of circles in the Messianic movement as a whole, is a lot of people that come in this direction tend to get to a knowledge of facts. They soak up so much of the facts of everything. It's like, oh, this is so fascinating. I never knew this. Oh, wow, now I know what the Shabbat's about. Now I know what the feasts were about. And they tell the redemption story. And they look at all these different aspects of everything. And yet it's just it's a head knowledge. It doesn't actually change anything in their life. And there are a lot like that. They're learning. They come to a place of maybe acknowledging the Shabbat and understanding the Torah, and then when it comes, like I said, to the synagogue, then it becomes, well, that's too much. I'm not going to get that close. I'm not going to stand that close. And so their idea of standing is something at a distance. It's not necessarily a covenant loyalty. Standing doesn't mean you're not necessarily standing because you come here. We're accused much of being too Jewish here. But just because you come here doesn't mean you're actually standing. It's easy to do it in here. Different to be out there. And all those things are good things. They're a starting point. But, standing is a pursuit. Speaking when silence is easier, showing support when being neutral would be safer. And it's also refusing to let the distance there go unchecked. There is a natural distance that we have here that isn't from our side of things, but from greater Israel's side. Because we believe Yeshua is the Messiah, there is a distance that is placed on us from Israel as a whole. But that doesn't mean that you let that distance go unchecked. And okay, you say I shouldn't have a part in it. Well, go ahead, make me. Like, I'm still standing with you, whether you like it or not. I'm here. I love you because I know that God is going to open some eyes, and this is all going to change, and you're going to understand it. In the meantime, I'm standing with you. I'm not going anywhere. But there's a cost to that standing. You know, he says it in 1 Peter 3, even if you suffer for righteousness' sake, you're blessed. You know, most people don't fall away under the pressure. They tend to fall away before it ever arrives. It's not that people want to back out and fall away under persecution. It's usually anticipating the persecution, where you make those first steps of withdrawal. Anticipate the cost and make an adjustment early. We can soften our stance, create some distance, and become less visible. It's easy to be visible among like-minded people. It's easy to do the things that we do in here, look the way that we do, but when we go out there, the temptation's always to be, well, I don't want to be that visible. I'd rather just blend in. And we're not to worry about their threats. You know, and the priest, when he went out to the one with Za'arat, he had to examine and declare the condition. It wasn't a distant observation. He didn't just stand at a distance and realize the problem. He had to get up and personal. It required engagement. Now, sometimes it's been interesting in my travels around and everything, the different people that I've ran into. Gentile, I had a lot of 99.9999% of the time, a simple thing like this has been positive. People ask questions, they engage with you, they talk. Most of it's been good. Some not so good, but it hasn't necessarily been hostile. But I've ran into a few that had to talk about why you get to that point and realize, well, why is the diaspora going on? Why is the exile still in effect? Why is God's presence still not back? Sometimes it just takes being very blunt about it and talking about, well, why has it been 2,000 years? But that engaging means risk. And it takes humility and reverence, like Peter talked about when you're dealing with it. But there's a risk with it. There's a risk of association, a risk of misunderstanding, a risk of discomfort. Sometimes there's the risk that maybe I'm going to come down with the actual disease. I've had that too early on, because I've seen and read about others that would come, start joining up with the Jewish people, and only come to rejection of Messiah. That happens from time to time. And so there's that risk that, well, maybe I could come down with that same evil speech against the one that was sent. But the priest still stepped forward. And standing today with God's people brings that criticism, misrepresentation, the social tension, perhaps even job loss. The initial temptation's always to say, I'm just going to stay out of it. I'm just going to put distance and withdraw. Is it really worth it? But if we make that decision now, made in comfort, when things are actually good, what's going to determine how we're going to stand when crisis comes? Because if you don't stand in peace, I don't know how you plan to stand when there's actual pressure. Now back to this in Peter. Instead, sanctify Messiah as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope that's in you. What you have in your heart, what you set apart in your heart, determines where you stand at in public. If comfort is Lord, is King, you follow comfort. If just being accepted and blending in and being a part of everybody is Lord of your heart, you'll follow the crowd. But if the Lord, if Yeshua is set apart as Messiah in your heart, you're ready to give an answer to those who ask you for a reason. You're ready to stand even if it costs now. Because we desire Israel to be restored. We desire Israel as a whole to be reconciled to Messiah. We desire Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon, all of them to be reconciled with who's there now and who's around the diaspora. Restoration in Leviticus 14, when one was restored, it wasn't supposed to be a hidden thing. The Kohen who cleanses him is to set the man who's to be cleansed along with those items before Adonai at the entrance of the tent of meeting. It wasn't to be hidden. This was right out in plain sight. Right there before the Lord and before man, the one being restored. Restoration is not supposed to be hidden. It's public, intentional, and visible. God's work is supposed to be seen, and what he stands for should be what we stand for. Are we not called to be priests? Be a kingdom of Kohanim? I'm of the opinion our convictions just can't stay private if they're truly rooted in God. We can't claim to love Israel and then just go silently along with the culture in our day-to-day life. Now, Emor, Parsha this week, saying but not doing. I believe that standing with Israel, standing with God's people, has to be visible enough to matter, has to mean something, grounded enough to endure. I actually need to do some standing with. Private conviction without some sort of public alignment and it just collapses under pressure. We haven't seen anything yet. It's easy right now. And if you don't do what your words say, it's just completely meaningless. Knowing all the facts is a complete waste of time if it doesn't actually change anything. There were times not that long ago when there were those that when the persecution really hit, they didn't have a Jewish DNA background and all of that, but they were willing to take the mark of being a Jew because they were going to stand with his people, that this was wrong. And what happens to you happens to me. And I love you because you are my employer, you were my employee, you are my neighbor, and we're willing to make that ultimate cost. Take that. But that takes a clear conscience in order to make a choice like that. It takes consistency, because a clear conscience doesn't start during the crisis. Clear conscience starts in a quiet, unnoticed choices of our day-to-day life. We train our conscience. What you tolerate, what you ignore, what you excuse, what you watch, what you listen to. Our conscience is formed in the easy times. And you think about the house that had Za'arat. I think it's interesting. It talks about how a house could come down with it. The corruption spread and the house is torn down. If it was addressed, it could be restored. And it's so true of our conscience now that if you train it now and don't let unchecked problems go unnoticed, contain them before they spread. And we're seeing a lot of that kind of stuff these days, aren't we? more and more. How we're seeing what was once like a quiet kind of prejudice, all of a sudden it's ramping up and it's getting really public again. You know, someone that had a small compromise would talk about something here or there, and you go, I don't know about that. And now all of a sudden, they're open about it. And someone that had a little bit of distance between them and Israel, now all of a sudden it's become blatant and looks altogether permanent. You know, and if we allow the small moments, small compromises now, if I'm willing to back out of just a simple kippa moment, how can I expect to have any kind of strength later on? You know, what we tolerate during the calm season determines what's going to collapse when the real crisis comes. History tends to repeat itself. You know, in the Parshas, it was separation. He was dealing with separation, but a path back of restoration. There was that impurity, but God making a way back. And when we are supposed to be called to bring good tidings, proclaiming peace, saying to Zion, your God reigns, with that comes the pressure, but a call to stand. Going to be plenty of opposition, but we have that call to bless. God doesn't call his people to distance themselves when things are easy. He's calling us to stand faithfully as one people now, so that we're still standing together as one people when it gets real. Because history's already shown what happens when people don't live this out. You know, there were moments when standing with the Jewish people, standing with Israel, was very costly. All throughout history, over and over, it's shown again. And you know, many of those who once might have stood had already become comfortable with distance. It started with something small. Oh, a tax levied. Well, if you're Jewish, you get this tax. Are you? No, I'm not. I don't want to pay the tax, therefore I'm just going to put some distance. It starts with something small. And it escalates and escalates, and one thing on top of another. It's usually things don't come in like a locomotive into the congregation. It comes in small and quiet. Okay, it comes in the small little things that you deal with on a day-to-day. You know, how often when I'm dealing with my walk with people, is it so easy to want to distance yourself from why you don't celebrate some things and you celebrate other things, why you don't eat with everyone else what they're eating and you're different. The pressure is there constantly to make small compromises. And it's every day. There's rarely a day comes by that there's not a temptation somewhere to make a withdraw back. Something as simple as, well, if I happen to have this scene, somebody might ask questions, and I mean, what are we really afraid of in those moments? And then when the moment really does come down to it, they weren't ready. They weren't ready to stand then, and we won't be ready to stand now. And usually, most of them didn't wind up somewhere in the middle. They ended up, went so far as they were on the other side, and they were the ones calling in and accusing and joining in with everybody else. It had gotten to that point where they were so withdrawn from it. I've read so many stories of that. People that initially were with the Jewish people, and then little by little withdrew to a point where they were the ones calling them in. So, you know, my question is, what are you practicing now? Where are you standing now? Is it a silence, or bold enough to speak truth? Is it practicing some sort of distance now? Well, that's for them. That's not for me. They do that. I'm not. Is it that distance, or is it like Ruth, that covenant loyalty? Where you go, I go. Where you die, I die. Where you buried, I'll be buried. Your God shall be my God. Your people shall be my people. Is it comfort or just conviction? How one with God's people do we really desire to be? How much of the wall of separation are we willing to let be torn down? There's always something from all directions wanting to put that wall back up. Yeshua desired that wall be torn down, that we be one, but I see it all the time from different sides wanting that wall built back up. You know, if only the church had practiced this all along, loving your neighbor as yourself. But we tend to choose who we want to be our neighbor and who we want to love and who we really want to stand with. Whatever we're practicing today is what's going to define us tomorrow when the pressure really comes down. Because I believe it's coming. I've certainly seen it ramping up more and more here, and I just can't believe how in the last few weeks I've had something that has gone from never having to deal with before all the way now to the governor of a state over something as simple as just making a simple choice to stand with God's people. You know, so this was one who wasn't willing to let that distance grow unchecked, and it cost him. And I want to go back to what I said at the beginning, that it doesn't matter, Jew, Gentile, whatever, the same choice has to be made. Thought it was interesting here in Hebrews. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Instead, he chose to suffer mistreatment along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. He considered the disgrace of Messiah as greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to the reward. I mean, Moses, he's of the people, and he still had a choice to make. And there's plenty of Jewish people out there that have that same choice, and they decide, no, I'm not going to suffer with God's people. I want nothing to do with God. I want nothing to do with any of that stuff. And they go the way of Egypt and would rather be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. But here's Moses having that same choice to make. And did you catch how choosing to suffer with God's people here is choosing Messiah? That just really hit me that, like I said, you can't separate the two. If you choose Messiah, the sufferings of Messiah, you join in with the sufferings of his people. And if you choose the sufferings of his people, Messiah is suffering with them. Is Israel still in covenant? Because we have to deal with that question all the time. Are they still in covenant with God? Because is it based on man or is it based on God? Was it his promise, or are we still in covenant? Say we are. Is it based on our deeds or his? You know, God has been very, very good to us. We are spoiled rotten here. We don't have a clue what it's really like. I think it's hard to prepare for things getting hard when you have nothing to look back on, nothing immediate anyway. I could go back to probably some grandparents could tell me otherwise, but at least for me, I've not known real hardship. not knowing the cost of actually standing for something, and we have it so very, very, very good right now. But if here, while it's all good and it's all easy, and there's no real pressure and there's no persecution, as far as I know, no one's about to come busting in the door and shoot the place up. But I don't know how long that might stay that way. There was a time not long ago when the same thing was said of Germany, and it didn't take too many years before it was completely the entire continent. That can change quick. And if we're not wanting to be faithful now and be visible and be active and let small distance go unchecked and things grow, how are we going to be able to recognize any good later on? We can't see the good now and can't take advantage of it and make it the most that we can and develop the relationships and the conversations and try and persuade people and talk with people now. If we can't do it now, I don't know how it's going to get any easier later. So we just need to be prepared to stand, work on preparing to stand now, or I think we're just rehearsing in small increments a retreat later on. That's all I had to share. I don't know if it came together like I intended it to or not, but I just want to encourage everybody to try and find ways in your day-to-day life to stand, to engage with people. Don't let silence take over a conversation, and when you hear something going on, don't let it go unchecked. It may cost, but probably not very much now compared to later on down the road. I would ask that you would all continue to pray for my situation. Hopefully that in the next week or two, it can get permanently resolved. But in the meantime, it's been a test on me, because there have been a couple of times where I could have backed out of the whole thing, and I knew that my conscience wasn't going to sit well with that later on. Anyway, that's all I had.